It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Welcome back. You're live with Expresso. If we look a little bit emotional, we've just heard the sound check. Craig Lucas and his incredible ensemble here today, sounding truly phenomenal. Just the perfect interludes as we broach something vitally important. The month of July obviously focuses on mental health awareness. This gives us the opportunity to come together to show our support and efforts for those who suffer from a range of mental disorders. Now, according to the World Health Organization, bipolar disorder is a preventative mental health condition affecting 60 million people. 60 million people worldwide. That's incredible. Putting emphasis on bipolar this month gives us the opportunity to raise awareness and eliminate any social stigma. Probably most important. Now, here to help us understand bipolar disorder, please welcome psychiatrist Kerryn Armstrong. And a little bit later, we'll be welcoming back actress Melanie Du Bois. Doc, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you so much.
It's so good to have you here. It's so good to have you here. I think one of the earliest things you want to start when you start a conversation around this is getting that understanding and the definitions out the way. So first things first, what is bipolar disorder? Please, let's break it down.
For sure. So bipolar disorder is a serious mental health condition that is characterized by periods of extreme mood and behavioral changes that occur with periods of normal mood and function in between. So, you know, all of us have times that we're feeling really happy, have a good day on a bit of a high, and times that we feel down and low.
The sine wave.
Yes, but, you know, in bipolar disorder, the highs are extremely high, so they have a euphoric quality in nature, and they last for days at a time, and are accompanied by other symptoms, such as decreased need for sleep, huge increases in energy, so racing thoughts, behavior that, you know, someone's going as if they're driven on a motor, and very often start to act really out of character, impulsively doing things without thinking that, you know, can become really dangerous and impact on a person's life. And the lows, on the other hand, are also extremely disabling, severe in nature, last for days at a time, and are accompanied by other symptoms, including really low energy, so kind of not being able to get out of bed in the morning, feeling really hopeless, low motivation, feeling no joy in life, hopelessness, worthlessness, even suicidal thoughts.
You know, as you're speaking, I know if I'm feeling this, and a lot of people are feeling it, like, hang on a minute, I've experienced shades of that in my own life. I think we all experience that wave, as you say, but and I think the misconception that the highs are where it's all good, but often the biggest, you know, mistakes, the things that really affect you the most in a negative way can happen on the highs, but it's a scale. So when we talk about bipolar 1 and bipolar 2, what do we mean?
So exactly like you said, you know, we're looking at the mood disorders more and more now along a whole spectrum. So, you know, where a person lies on this whole spectrum is very much an individual process. So the differences between bipolar 1 and 2 essentially lie in the high periods. So bipolar 1 has what we call manic episodes. So the highs are incredibly high in nature, last for at least a week at a time, and often are incredibly impairing. They can go along with what we call psychotic symptoms, so losing touch with reality, and often are as extreme that one requires hospitalization. Whereas bipolar 2, the lows are shorter in duration, the highs are shorter in duration and not quite as impairing. So a person can still often function in their normal life, but really are just kind of almost going in overdrive.
Wow. Okay, so it clearly is a lot more complex than what people might think when it comes to having
we love to use the term, hey? Everyone's like, bipolar.
Yeah. And I think people said it, you know, very casually. I mean, how many times have you heard people say, don't be coming here with your bipolar attitude. That's actually not an attitude, and that's the thing that people need to understand. It's not a mood. You don't wake up and go, today I'm feeling bipolar.
I'm on a high,
I'm on a high, and so that must be it. It's a serious conversation that must continue to be had, and it's so good that we've got the month of July dedicated to spreading awareness across the board. And we invite you to join in on this conversation because we do have our expert, Kerryn, in the house. We're also going to be catching up with Melanie as well. Connect with us on social media. We want to hear from you. Expresso Morning Show, SABC3.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Of course, we are continuing our discussion on bipolar disorder and have Dr. Armstrong with us now. And we've been discussing a lot just in this time because we are obviously hugely interested, yes, but influenced in our own lives. And I think there are very few people out there who aren't either personally affected or have it within their dynamic. I think maybe a big part of the healing process begins with the people around you.
Yes.
I think your family, possibly your partners, your parents have to be able to identify and help you through that, because when you're caught in the throes of it, it is very difficult to self-diagnose, to be able to do anything about it. So what are some of the first signs, maybe for a person who might be experiencing it and for someone close to them?
For sure. I mean, bipolar disorder, as we were just chatting about, has a huge impact on the people around one, and often is really difficult to understand. And essential that, people around you are supportive and are aware of all of the signs to look for, to be able to say, okay, I think you're needing to get to your psychiatrist, I'm a bit worried about things, or just encouraging someone to get help. So, most people go through a depressive phase as one of the initial phases.
Yeah.
So often a person can have several depressive phases before experiencing a manic or hypomanic phase. So the depressive phases, really low energy, just not being able to get out of bed in the morning, feeling really down. So all of those symptoms are quite typical. The manic episodes, generally what happens first is there's a difference in sleep. So often that's one of the things to start looking for. If someone around you is functioning on less and less sleep, that often then leads into one of those manic or hypomanic episodes. So, it's looking out for things like that. Sleep changes, behavioral changes, a person starting to act out of character for what is normal for them, doing things that are impulsive, really just any change that is out of character for a person,
It's interesting you mentioned that, and I'll take it back to one question, in fact, I wanted to ask you earlier, and maybe sort of combine these questions. The one is, what is the link between bipolar disorder and depression? Because if you say there are quite a number of depressive phases, what does that mean and how can we tell? But also, what is the typical onset then of bipolar disorder? When can people be diagnosed? Can people be diagnosed as children, for example?
Certainly. So, I mean, there is definitely a link between depression and bipolar disorder. And in bipolar disorder, you meet criteria for depressive episodes within that. But the difference is that in bipolar disorder, you also have the extreme highs. And in relatives with people with bipolar disorder, there is increased risk for depression. So the two definitely are related.
Spectrum.
Spectrum.
It's the spectrum.
Precisely.
And I would imagine often misdiagnosed. We'll chat about identifying it in children and maybe the similarities with something like an ADD with those highs, and ultimately the causes. But we're going to talk about the effects of bipolar disorder on your life and empathize with you. And we'd love to hear from you if you have experienced this in one way or another. Please post your comments, your advice, maybe your inspiring story on our social media platforms. We'd love to hear from you.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Welcome back to it. It is your feel-good breakfast show, Expresso, live here on SABC3, continuing on with our very important conversation and discussion around bipolar disorder. All of this in light of the fact that we are commemorating mental health awareness in the month of July. We have heard that the numbers are scary. 60 million people are living with bipolar and suffering, not just living, suffering with this bipolar disorder. And it's very important to have this conversation. That's why we have Melanie also now joining us, as well as Dr. Armstrong, and the conversation continues. We have so many questions.
Yeah, I know.
This is what I've loved about
this discussion is because we're all relating personal.
For
So
sure.
I'll speak quite openly that I've been medicated at times in my life, and often it's been attached to something very extreme that's been happening, which has kind of made it even more confusing to try to identify. We've spoken to crew members who are living with the disorder as we speak right now, and I love the fact that people are being brave enough to talk about it.
Yes.
Likewise, Mel, when did you identify? Was it identified in you? Did you have a gut check moment where you're like, okay, I need to do something, I need to speak to someone?
Mine was different. 2015, I suffered lots of trauma. My nephew committed suicide, and 3 months later, my sister committed suicide.
Wow.
I had a major breakdown, ended up in hospital, was first diagnosed with depression. Was medicated for that, and things were just not going right. I was, everything was spiraling out of control. Eventually landed with the right psychiatrist. Amazing woman, treated me as an individual and discovered that I suffer from bipolar. And I'm on the highest spectrum, so most of the time I'm like...
But that's completely understandable. I mean, you know, I kind of look at life like a pendulum, and you're kind of sitting there swinging, and then you go through what you've now described to us, and that that's just, you're spiraling out of... What did it take to get you to where you are now? Because, I mean, on an energetic level, you're connected, you're being a Renelle.
I'm being a Renelle.
the character.
But I have to say that the reason I'm also in this, firstly, I'm my medication. I take mood stabilizers. I also suffer from anxiety, so I have to take anxiety pills. I take antipsychotics. So there's a long list of medication that I have to, it's something I have to live with. But also right now, most of the time I'm manic, but right now I'm moving to Cape Town. It's taken a dip and it's gone to the other spectrum, which is quite amazing because a lot of triggers, outside triggers, affect sometimes which spectrum you
sit in
go.
that.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, because my next question for you, Kerryn, would be triggers. When you mention the spectrums of a really, high and the lows can be really low, do external factors play a role in what then gets to be experienced by the person living with bipolar?
For sure, you know, as you spoke about, very often there are these triggers, you know, critical periods in one's life that precipitate the mood episodes. So certainly traumas, losses, hugely stressful events in a person's life can trigger episodes. Also periods where a person is under extreme strain, having to work crazy hours, you know, long hours. As soon as a person is starting to push to stay awake for longer, you know, sleep deprivation can trigger episodes. Substances, so even some over-the-counter and other medications, slimming pills, dieting pills, steroids, abuse of substances definitely. So methamphetamines, cannabis, you know, it's a big thing coming up in the media now. So all of these things can trigger episodes. Also, pregnancy and childbirth are big changes that can be associated.
Wow.
So certainly, you know, a lot of things a person needs to be aware of, and those then become things that a person who is diagnosed with bipolar disorder needs to be very much aware of and careful about.
I think, and we're going to continue this with one more kind of conclusion to the discussion. Thank you so much for stepping out there. The bottom line is, I think we are all in some way affected by devastating situations, about times in our lives that just knock us completely off our stable base. And this is something that we need to start talking about. People need to be able to relate to this information so you can start on that journey. Whatever the first step is for you, hopefully now you are thinking about taking that first step, or if you are close to someone who's experiencing the craziness of bipolar disorder, you can take that first step. But we're going to round off with some advice from both of our guests on how you can broach this and what it feels like to be caught in that space and to move into a healthier rhythm within your life. But thank you, ladies. This has been very, very, very rewarding and enriching so far. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Thank you very much, Leanne. So we continue our conversation with Dr. Kerryn Armstrong and Melanie Du Bois here on your Feel Good Breakfast Show Expresso. We're talking about bipolar disorder. It is Mental Health Awareness Month, and the whole aim of this is really to raise awareness and eliminate all the social stigma that's associated with mental health. Ladies, once again, thank you so much. It's so good to have you here. First question that comes to my mind as we go along with this conversation is whether bipolar disorder can be passed on genetically if one finds themselves in a family where their mom or their grandparents may have had bipolar disorder.
Or is it all situational?
Yeah.
Where does it sit?
Yeah, I mean, for sure, there is a really strong genetic link. So the heritability, you know, about 85% of the vulnerability is in the heritability.
85.
So in any first-degree relative of a person with bipolar disorder is at a 10 times increased risk of developing bipolar disorder when compared to kind of the general population. So, you know, strong genetic risk. But on top of that, you know, it isn't as simple, like just a single gene that you're born with that you're going to develop bipolar disorder. So it's a really complex hereditary pattern.
Getting a visit from Bob. I think our little Bobby might sit somewhere on the spectrum as well, so we've come to relate a little bit. That is very, very interesting to me. You know, there are so many questions here, and we've seen a couple of our social media comments coming through, questions coming through. That maybe Mel, you can help with this. That through your own experience, and one of them is saying, so what behavioural changes? What can I do to control it? And we know meds are, and finding the right balance of meds is vitally important. But maybe some of the lifestyle changes, what you've been able to do, and what's the best way to react? How have people helped you, those close to you? Because you don't get through life alone.
Yeah, no, definitely. My family has been my rock. It's been amazing, and that's why I think my life is turned upside down being here in Cape Town, away from my family. So having that stability, but also knowing your triggers. That's very important. Knowing what situation, like with me, anxiety. People think I'm really rude in public, but when a lot of people surround me and it's Felicity all around me, I get anxious and it's like my heart starts beating
Pick the wrong
fast.
career,
Like,
girl.
oh shit! Oh no! Unfortunately, but pre-2015, it was fine. I could do all this, but post. It just changed completely. My whole world changed.
Well, you've been
completely.
redefined. How do you go through that without being redefined?
Well, some of the questions that have come through on social media, Luminati Singatu sent us a message wanting to find out what's the best way to react, or to behave, I suppose, if you aren't living with bipolar, to behave around someone who is living with bipolar without offending them. I'm imagining that's what they're trying to understand. And second question, which you can add to that is, from Illuminati also, can it be cured? And if yes, how?
Do you live with it forever?
Well, I at this moment, I'm living with it and surviving my best. But my question to them is, how do you treat a person with cancer? It's an illness. I take my meds. I live a life that's amazing. Some people ask me, how does it affect my acting? It makes it so much better. I feel deeper. I do everything with so much energy. I live my life as
I suppose so as to not to come across, sorry, Kerryn, insensitive. You know, if you knew that someone was living with bipolar, were you already avoiding if they had like a bit of a mood change at work? You don't want to be saying, oh, it's because you got bipolar, that's why you're acting this way. You know, those kind of, you know, nuances and sensitivities. Kerryn, do you have anything to add to that?
I just wanted to add to the can it be cured, you know, aspect, because I think that is something that's really important. You know, it isn't something that one can take a pill for a short while and then you're cured. But you can basically prevent the episodes by being on medication long term. So you can still live a completely, as you know, as you've experienced, a completely full, normal life. But one does need to find the medication that works for you. And as we were speaking about it just now, it's a process of getting to the right combination of medication. There's side effects involved, so you know it's a journey getting there. But one can be on the right combination of medication, and you know then be able to function really well, you know, normally.
You know, just to round off, if I can say thank you so much to both of you. The work that you do every day in this space, and for coming, applying your professional expertise here, Mel, for opening up and connecting. So many of us can connect in one way or another. As a father, I'm constantly asking myself, how do I allow my son to be the best man that he can be without going through the hard stuff that makes you the best person that you can be? That's what life is. It's these challenges. Don't look to shut a disorder out, but assimilate it. It's part of who we are, so we learn to live our best lives in that space. Maybe it's the key to you discovering the person that you are meant to be, which is exactly where I can see Melanie is, and I'm hoping so many more people can relate. If you are struggling right now, 0800 456 789. That is the number for the South African Depression and Anxiety Group. 24 hours a day, they're available and they are amazing. So that number will be on all of our social media platforms. Take that first step, phone them.